Welcome back. And as we progress, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria reserves the constitutional right to exercise the prerogative, the powers of the prerogative of mercy. And under that right, the President has granted clemency to 173 Nigerians. And some of them, of course, we've mentioned General Mamman Vatsa, who was executed after a military trial in 1986. But others on that list, seem to have been drawing quite a number of reactions over the weekend. There was Mariam Sanda, who was convicted and sentenced to death by hanging in 2020, for murdering her husband. There's also others on the list. Funke Francis Chibueze, Dr. Nwogu Peters, Mrs. Anastasia Daniel Nwoba. And according to reports, the president showed them clemency based on reports that they had turned over a new leaf, they had acquired a new skill while in incarceration. And this drew quite a number of concerns and reactions over the weekend. Let's have this conversation now and find out just how wide the latitude of the powers of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is as far as this particular constitutional right is concerned. And joining us on the program is lawyer Mr. Inibehe Effiong, who joins us virtually. Good morning, Mr. Effiong. Thank you for coming on the program. Mr. Effiong, you may have to unmute your device so that we can hear you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Indeed. Welcome to the program. So constitutionally, help us understand what exactly is said about the rights of the president to exercise the prerogative of mercy. Are there any limits to this right?
Thank you. Well, by virtue of Section 175 of the 1999 Constitution, the president has basically an unlimited constitutional power to exercise what is called the prerogative of mercy, which is essentially an act of clemency or pardon, where the president issues a proclamation, basically forgiving and also pardoning those who have been convicted or those who are subject to the criminal process, whether in terms of prosecution and so on. So basically, the Constitution does not place any limitation regarding the qualification, regarding the requirements for granting clemency, except that the president is required to act on the recommendation of a body called the Presidential Committee on Prerogative of Mercy, which is headed by the Attorney General of the Federation, in this case, Mr. Lateef Fagbemi. Yes, sir. Now, when the president acts on the recommendation of the Presidential Committee and issues clemency or presidential pardon, that pardon is absolute. What it implies in law is that it extinguishes and basically brings to an end the criminal history and the criminal record of the person that is pardoned. The person becomes basically a new person, and there is no longer reference to the criminal liability of the person. Now, the current pardon that the president has issued for about 175 individuals is one that expectedly has triggered very interesting national conversation. I have had cause to examine the list of those who are beneficiaries of this set of presidential pardon. And I find it rather curious that the president, for reasons best known to him, and the Presidential Committee on Prerogative of Mercy has decided to issue pardons to individuals that we do not think merit it. There are some persons on that list whose pardon is understandable, like Mamman Vatsa. I personally have a position to this that, look, in the case of Mamman Vatsa, for example, General Babangida, who orchestrated the sham trial and conviction of Mamman Vatsa, himself was a coup plotter. He also basically staged a coup that overthrew a previous administration. So I do not know what moral authority that Babangida stands to be speaking that, oh, the security of the state was threatened and so on in his book or whatever. So on Mamman Vatsa's pardon, that is understandable, that is excusable. And the same can also be said about the Ogoni 9, as you are aware, which was basically a situation in the Niger Delta region where I come from. But beyond that, some of the other names on that list, one is minded to ask what the motive of the president is. When you have a presidential pardon awarded to over 30 convicts, persons who were convicted for involvement in hard drugs, in illicit drugs, being basically issued pardons, the question is what now becomes of the years of work and effort that the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency had put into the arrest and the prosecution of these individuals. What message does that send to other drug traffickers who are going out of their way to basically undermine the security of the country? You also look at some of the other names on the list, like Miriam Sanda. I'm not sure if she merits a pardon or whether this is the right time to issue a pardon to her. Here is a woman who the court confirmed in 2020 gruesomely murdered her husband in 2017. And did so in the most vicious way, stabbed him multiple times, and the gentleman died, and now he's in the grave, his body is decaying, he has been forgotten, and the person who was supposed to be his most trusted ally, the person who was supposed to be the love of his life, took his life prematurely, and now we are being told, oh, that in the interest of the children, in the interest of the family, and because she has allegedly shown remorse, let us forgive and let her have a new lease of life. Let her be released. What becomes of the family of, I think, Alilu, the husband, the deceased husband that she murdered? So these are the questions. And what message, in terms of the optics, does this send? My perception is that this pardon that the president has issued is basically going to embolden criminality in the country. It is like a carnival for criminals in our country. And I find curious that certain names are also missing. Because if the president is now basically so emboldened, so audacious, to issue pardon to people that are involved in hard drugs and kidnappers, hardened kidnappers, then how come that Aneni, the man who basically gave kidnapping the notoriety that they have in the country today, was not pardoned? How come that Evans, the notorious, the billionaire kidnapper in quotes, has not been pardoned? So if the president is now basically becoming the savior of hardened criminals in our country, then he should go the whole way and pardon all those who have also been found guilty of similar offenses. They should open the prison wall, the prison gates. They should open Kirikiri and allow the criminals to go. I do not think that some of these pardons were warranted. And the argument that, oh, they have become new people, they are reformed, they have shown remorse, that is questionable. If you have been to a typical Nigerian custodial center, if you have been to the Nigerian Correctional Service, if you understand how the Nigerian prison system works, there is hardly anything correctional about the Nigerian Correctional Service. And I speak from experience as somebody who has also had, cause to understand how the Nigerian custodial system works. So I do not buy the argument that all these individuals are remorseful, that all individuals have turned a new leaf, that because they have been enrolled in the National Open University, therefore we should just simply forgive them. So we need to really question the motive of the president in issuing these pardons. Yes, he has the constitutional authority to do so. Yes, nobody can challenge that constitutional authority to the extent that Section 175 allows him. But the message that is being sent across the country today is that the victims have been relegated and that criminals can have a field day. So I do not agree with some of these pardons that the president has issued.
A couple of issues, really, that you have put together here. Some have said, as a lawyer, some of these processes sometimes may not have been followed through well. Some of these trials, perhaps for lack of representation, due diligence, some of these trials may have gone the other way. So a possibly innocent person may have been sentenced. So that would be a false positive in that sense. And I'm sure you are aware of some of these things. On the one hand, it's also been said that, well, our prisons are no more prisons. They're meant to be correctional centers. So it's good to see that a lot of these people, their behavior is being corrected in that sense. So don't you think this is really an act in good faith? First, it decongests our correctional centers on the one hand. It also encourages other inmates to to look at life as, okay, I can get a second shot at life, so let me do better while I'm here. Let me try to pursue education. Let me try to be a better person for the society. So having looked at all of those factors, what did you say it's a way to go? Because I know lawyers who also say, well, temper justice with mercy. So if you ask for that in court, why not support that in real life?
You've asked a question, which is understandable, but the point I am making is that if we are now going to simply issue pardon based on the reasons that this government has given, then every person that is in the Nigerian custodial center should equally be pardoned, right? Because if you are saying, oh, let us decongest the custodial center, I support the congestion because I know that the Nigerian custodial centers are heavily congested. But the way to go about it is not in the manner that this president has done. And in any event, if you want to decongest the custodial centers, you have to examine the entire criminal justice system as a whole. The president, I do not believe, has any interest in decongesting the Nigerian custodial centers. 2 years, he has spent getting to 3 years in office. We have not seen any reform of the police because it is the police that is responsible for the congestion by arresting people unlawfully, arbitrarily, throwing them into the custodial centers. We haven't seen any serious reform in that regard. We're going to test saying that. So if you want to pardon, seems to be essentially individuals who commit murder, right? Very serious, very heinous people convicted for petty offenses on that list. So is it that these are individuals who have connection, who have access to the Presidential Committee on Prerogative of Mercy? Are we going to now begin to infer that possibly the process of presidential pardon has been commercialized? Yeah, right? And what is the basis? What is the basis for giving these pardons to individuals convicted of very serious offenses? I do not think that the manner the president has done this is proper. I believe there could have been a better way to go about this. And look at even one of the individuals there, Kelvin, who was convicted for kidnapping. What is the guarantee that when individuals return to the society, that their victims are going to be safe? What arrangement has the federal government made to guarantee the safety of witnesses who testified at the trial against these individuals? Have the government put in place a witness protection program to guarantee their safety? How about the families of the victims? How about the families of the victims? Has the government reached out to them? Has the government made efforts to ensure that their concerns are addressed?
All right.
I do not think this was done.
Because, Mr. Effiong, because of the weight of these concerns, and you've alluded to the possibility that, there could be partisan and political pressures on, the Committee on the Prerogative of Mercy, isn't it concerning also that there are no limits to this exercise of the powers of the Prerogative of Mercy, and should it be subjected to some form of constitutional review?
Well, I'm not sure if that will be possible because if you look at what is applicable in most jurisdictions, the president, even in the UK, the Crown, if you look at the power of the state to issue pardon, it is hardly contested. It is hardly pardoned. Even in the United States, debuted as the most advanced democracy in the country. Look at the pardon that President Biden handed down shortly before he left office. When Donald Trump came in, the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, I believe, he issued pardon to nearly all of them, despite the gravity of the offenses that they committed. So, historically and across jurisdictions across the globe, the power of the head of state or the president to issue pardon is hardly subject to limitations. And there is a philosophy behind that, which is that the president should have the discretion. And it is also expected that the president should act in the public interest. But what I see in this pardon that President Tinubu has handed down, it looks largely political. It looks as if the interest that precipitated these pardons is not that of the nation. I believe that most of these pardons are issued because the individuals who are beneficiaries of these pardons have access to possibly members of the Presidential Committee on Prerogative of Mercy. Right? Look at Mariam Sanda, for example. The mother is known to be a highly influential person. I believe even possibly a member of the ruling party. So is it that the committee just sat down and began to pick names at random and recommended them for pardon. I do not think so. I believe that these pardons have been issued because of influence peddling, because of access to power, and possibly for partisan reasons.
All right.
Yes, there are those who have been pardoned that merits them. Look at the one of Abed Macaulay. It's a bit pejorative. You know, we know Abed Macaulay, the father of nationalism in Nigeria, who was, you know, controversially and politically convicted by the British colonialists, I think in 1913. And in 2025, the president is issuing a pardon. And if you look at section 175 of the 1999 Constitution, the power of the president to issue pardon is limited to offenses created by an act of the National Assembly.
All right.
Abed Macaulay was not convicted for an offense created by an act of the National Assembly. And under the saving provision under the Constitution, I do not think that colonial laws have been saved, have been made part of our corpus juris as part of our laws in Nigeria. So there's even a constitutional question regarding that of Abed Macaulay, which is yet to be answered, which some of us are still interrogating. Whether indeed this president has the power to issue pardon to Abed Macaulay. Because he's now looking as if Macaulay actually committed a crime. There is a bit of history that shows
Mr. Effiong, we must anchor.
Have been an attempt by the colonialists to silence him. So they just choose some of those credible names to basically give credence to this highly controversial pardon that the president has issued. If we are tired of fighting crime as a country,
we must anchor the conversation. At this point, Mr. Effiong, pardon me for butting in, but we must anchor the conversation. Clearly, it's an ongoing conversation, especially one that bothers on social justice for those whose names on that list that is drawing quite a number of reactions from Nigerians. Mr. Inibehe Effiong is a lawyer. Thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
We'll take a moment now. When we return, we'll have just another equally important conversation. It's about your health. It's Cancer Awareness Month. What are you doing to be aware and for regular checks? And what's the result of the efforts of government to combat this scourge? Stay with us for this next one. We'll be right back.